After weeks of traveling around the country, it is beginning to get crystal clear how the states may ultimately vote in the presidential primary of the People's Democratic Party, slated for this weekend in Abuja, the nation's capital. Although it is public knowledge that there are 15 aspirants in all, angling to fly the opposition's party's flag after 2 were disqualified from the initial 17. This analysis is done with 4 leading presidential hopefuls in focus. They are former Vice President Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, former President of the Senate, Dr. Bukola Saraki, former Governor of Anambra State, Mr. Peter Obi, and Governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike. The chances of the 4 contestants indicate that while 3 of the 4 major contenders will emerge tops, having made friends in all the states, the 4th, Peter Obi, is well liked across the country and may have the nation spread. But that will not translate to enough votes to win him the candidacy of his party, the PDP. Also worthy of mention is a former banker and businessman, Mr. Mohammed Hayatuddin, who, although will garner some votes in specific states, especially in the Northeast, may not make much impact. In addition, while Governor Aminu Tambuwal will readily win in Sokoto and share votes in a few other states, he will not have the nation spread to win the primaries. The same goes for Governor Emmanuel Odom, who is expected to pick a single state and votes in a few others. Dr. Abati, this is what the PDP is offering us at this point. I mean, it is clear that these 4 contenders are the people that, the delegates might select.
Okay, This is the front page story of this day newspaper today. With the banner headline. It's a 4-horse race. And the newspaper is telling us that as the PDP conducts its presidential primaries this weekend, that what we have are 4 persons who seem to be frontliners. Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, Dr. Bukola Saraki, former Senate President, Peter Obi, former Governor of Anambra State, and Nyesom Wike, incumbent governor of Rivers State. Now, but, the newspaper almost immediately eliminated Peter Obi on the grounds that whereas he's very popular and is well liked across the country, and he has, been running a very deliberate, purposeful, intentional campaign, the only one out of all the presidential candidates across all the 18 registered political parties for whom his supporters have organized a 1 million man march across Lagos, across Rivers, across Abuja, across the Federation, as it were. So with that analysis, with that preface, the analysis by Olawale Olaleye used to be on another program on this channel, This Day Live, is that 1 is actually a 3-horse race, basically. And if you look at the analysis that Olawale Olaleye has attempted, I found it, quite logical, quite, detailed and impressive. The first thing to note is that in his analysis, he gives, states of origin. He prioritizes states of origin. For example, we're told that Tambuwal will take Sokoto. Okay. That's common sense. Saraki will win in Kwara State and also in Kogi State. Okay, that's just pure common sense. He says Bauchi will go to Bala Muhammad, right? So there is a factor about where you come from. Rivers will go to Wike. All of this, just pure common sense. But when you now break down state by state, because the analysis goes from one state to the other, that's where the devil in the details now begin to emerge. And it seems to me that in many of the states, another factor that I consider, for example, is the governorship factor. Who is the governor close to? For example, in looking at Oyo State, he says, Seyi Makinde in Oyo State is a good friend of Nyesom Wike. And on the basis of that, he says this will go to, Oyo State will go to Wike, and maybe Atiku will pick up, a few of the delegates in that particular state. In other words, apart from state of origin, friendship is also a factor that I see in the analysis. The third factor that the analysts will seem to have considered in that front page story is also, the influence of the governors. Now, the amendment of the Electoral Act, the repeal of the Electoral Act 2010, resulting in the emergence of the Electoral Act 2022, in the eyes of the lawmakers, in the red and green chambers, was meant to curtail the influence of the governors. But from the analysis that Olale of this day has attempted, front page story, you see that these governors are still very powerful. And we have seen it on the field. And perhaps that is what is responsible for your introduction about how there is crisis in some of these states ahead of the PDP primaries. Maybe Chief Olabode George will help us, explain that further. So, one way or the other, these governors are still very influential. Now, let's go to the details. Okay, another person who is favored by state of origin and contiguity is the aspirant, Mr. Muhammad Ayatuddin, to whom, his state of origin is also assigned, and also the contiguous states where he has considerable influence. Now, let's look at the three major players in that this day analysis. Atiku Abubakar, Dr. Bukola Saraki, Nyesom Wike. But when you look at it critically, it looks like it comes down to a choice between Atiku Abubakar and Saraki. In many of the states, this day analysis is telling us, look, it will be Saraki and Atiku, particularly in Delta, in Kogi State, in Lagos, in Niger State, in Ogun State, where Wike is supposed to also pick up something, in Osun State, in Plateau, in the Federal Capital Territory, where it will be Atiku, Saraki, and Wike, right? So that is the analysis, as you have seen it. Of course, Anambra is naturally assigned to Peter Obi. Akwa Ibom is naturally assigned in the analysis to Emmanuel Udom. But in terms of spread in that analysis, it looks like this day is projecting that the PDP primaries will be majorly between Atiku Abubakar and Bukola Saraki. That's my reading. Right. Okay? Cross River State is the only state where we're told, well, it's going to be shared. Edo State is another state where we're told it's not so clear. Bayelsa is a state where the analyst tells us it's too close to call, which means it can go in any direction. But I think the analysis is useful. But at the end of the day, from that this day analysis, we're down in terms of projection to Atiku Abubakar and Senator Bukola Saraki.
Yes.
Now, Atiku Abubakar, he's been running for president since 1992. Right. And that has been a subject of, argument that why is he so desperate? Having been at one point vice president of Nigeria for eight years, why must he show up in every race? Okay? There was a video that you brought the other day in another segment of the program, was trending with Ojiope, although Paul Ibe, who is a campaign, a media assistant to former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, sent me another video saying that affirmatively, Donald Duke, former Governor Donald Duke, had changed his position and endorsed Atiku Abubakar. That was shortly after the program. But in any case, Atiku Abubakar has the right to run. Right. Okay? If he wants to be president, even if he is 90 years old, he can run. After all, Algeria had a president that was over 80 years old. Okay? That's not a problem. It's for his party to decide whether they want him or not. And he's been selling his experience as a perpetual runner for the office. Maybe this time he will be lucky. After all, the incumbent president, President Muhammadu Buhari, has achieved the record of running again and again and again, and then he fulfilled his dream, even if anybody does not give him any credit at the end of the day. But it will be on record that this was a man who had a dream and he pursued it and he achieved it. Nobody will be able to take that away from him. So maybe Atiku Abubakar may also be similarly lucky. As for Bukola Saraki, he has been Senate president. He was in the PDP, he left, he came back. He has had very significant experience. He has been governor in Kwara State, so he's not a rookie in the game. And he's also been running a very deliberate, articulate campaign going around the country. He's one of the few in the entire field that has put out a properly documented, articulated contract of engagement with Nigerians. The only other persons whose documents I've seen, maybe I've not seen some other ones, will be in that regard Rotimi Amici. I think he too came up with something very robust. Who else again has done a document? I've not seen Yesom Wike's document of engagement. Yes, Pastor Tunde Bakare has also said, this is what I will do. Okay? But it's up to the delegates, this week in the PDP to determine one way or the other. The delegates number in the PDP, we're told, is 801 delegates. If the president had, signed the re-amended or amended 84, Section 84.8 of the Electoral Act 2022, that number will probably have gone up to over 2,042. But that's beside the point. That has not happened, and I don't think that should be a big issue for either the PDP or the APC or the 16 other political parties to worry about.
Right. You appear to say it's a two-horse race. Unfortunately, they are both northern contenders, correct? But when you look at the analysis also, the analysis on this day, it appears that Wike is garnering all the states. I think the analyst said Abia, Ekiti, Enugu, Oyo, and Rivers. Wike seems it's projecting a clear winner of those states.
I mean, there's some good insights there, and I like data a lot, so I like to extrapolate data and the likes. Yes, a good one the analyst has done, not precisely empirical, but it's just like an overview data of what is happening, and he's been able to crunch, what are the pressure points and the variable points in the data sets. The variable points obviously will be, state of origin, which most of the time might not necessarily appear true, because we've seen people that have lost in their state of origin, but this is politics. Another point he talked about, probably like Dr. Mati enunciated, is the proximity, access to the governor of the state. How close are you to the governor of the state and the likes? And one third step is, your spread. Have you been able to do this? Straight off the bat, you've got two governors, Governor Peter Obi, you've got former Governor Bukola Saraki, you've got Nyesom Wike, you've got Emmanuel Lodom, a couple of governors in there. I'm sorry, I said more than two. And you've got a perennial runner that's been running since 1992, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar in the race. In the cleft field, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar obviously have more experience because he's been party front runner for so many years. I think since the time he's been running in 1992, the only time he didn't probably represent a party will be probably 92, because we all know MP Abiola emerged from the SDP ticket. And, 2003. And, but I think from 2007, I'm not sure he came out in 2011, if my memory serves me right. But, from downwards, he didn't come out in 2015, because then President Buhari against Goodluck Jonathan. But 2019, he came out and all of that. So it's just been a couple of times, if my memory serves me right, that he's not been a front runner. So he has more records of being a front runner on a party ticket. That's a plus for him. He's been able to get different party tickets. That's a plus for him. He was the last bearer of the PDP party ticket. That's Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. That's a plus for him. So he comes with way more experience than every other person in the field. But let's not extrapolate the data. Coming down to his state of origin, obviously Adamawa, he gets Adamawa. But the question is Adamawa a big delegate voting bloc? Because you've got 870 delegates. There are some states that obviously are pressure points. Because let's not forget, what it will come down to, it's not a winner takes all. So people that don't even get to win the states will still get some numbers out of the delegate vote. So take, for instance, a state like Lagos that they said upwards of 50% of the state will go to Saraki. I don't have the data of the delegate number in Lagos now, but if a sizable number goes to Saraki in Lagos states, other candidates who might get 1 or 2 numbers, and that might add up for them. A state like Anambra, that they said, okay, Peter Obi, obviously, he should have that feel because he's from Anambra State and he was former governor and, the PDP should be able to help him out in the state. It might not be entirely all the delegates. So other candidates who might pick 1 or 2 delegates. And across the board, states like Borno, for instance, that they say, okay, obviously we'll go to Mr. Hayatuddin. Obviously, some other candidates who will pick 1 or 2 numbers of the delegates. So I think what it normally comes down to is the fine mathematics at the end of the day. How you can pick from here, from there, and from here. The question is, can anybody have a general spread? No, it's impossible. But do some people have an advantage? Yes. And like this day rightly said, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar has got an advantage, and Bukola Saraki too has got an advantage because he too participated in the last primaries of the PDP in Port Harcourt. And he got some good chunk numbers in there. So he's got advantage and that edge over the rest. Is it going to count for him? It's a matter of time. A lot of people will say, yeah, he's a smoother politician, he's been former Senate president and the likes. A lot of things will count for him. That's another factor to it. So I think by saying from it's a 4-horse race, yes, Peter Obi has a national spread. A lot of people like Peter Obi. It's the buzz of the social media. But when it gets to the counting the delegates thing, would it actually get those number of delegates? Let's not also forget that this is Peter Obi's first time he's going to be a straight-on presidential candidate on any ticket. Is that going to count for him? Will he be first-time lucky? A lot of people will doubt because in Nigerian politics, you need that level of experience. So in all of this, yes, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar and Bukola Saraki, it will come down to the wires for both of them. But when you look at the indication there, albeit not empirical, but with the data sets, you will see that there's going to be a little edge, just over other candidates by Alhaji Atiku Abubakar.
Really?
People, yeah.
I'm seeing Governor Wike.
So, one final point.
No, I was still making my point. Okay. So you'll see that there's just going to be a little edge because when you see all the states, yes, Governor Wike might pick some, but he might not pick as much on the delegate count, But all of this we're saying, time will tell when that day finally comes. How much mathematics can come out there, how much they can crunch the numbers. Great analysis, but things might change. It's still fluid.
Okay, in politics, you can't be too exact. Anything can happen. 24 hours is a very long time in politics. But there was a point made in that this day front page story, in the concluding part. It's a matter of cash.
Yeah.
That's what the analysis concludes. Okay. So, that's the other factor that I left out earlier on that I just remembered. And I agree with the analyst that, yes, it's a matter of cash. Because last minute, we have seen it in politics. They hire the proposition. You could sway delegates even at the last minute. And that's why when we have these primaries, people camp their primaries. I hope somebody is going to focus on that and report how politicians camp primaries and even employ bodyguards to make sure that they don't even go anywhere close to the restroom where somebody can hijack them with cash. Yeah. So who has, the war chest? Is it Atiku? Is it Bukola Saraki? Or would Peter Obi, spring a surprise? Yeah. Or here's some Wike can just confound the analysts and mobilize enough resources. Because if indeed it's a matter of cash, anything can happen.
So does that remove Wike in that light? But I feel like he has been a member since 1998, right? And he's never decamped. So does that help in any way?
That might help. Castro will reign supreme. But another thing I'd like to quickly say is that a lot of politicians now have been eating breakfast, like in local parlance, because delegates collect their money and they don't turn up for them in the end.
That's another
There have been stories on social media about politicians having heart attack because he calculated that XYZ delegates was going to come and they didn't show up for the election.
Politics is about strategy. If you have delegates that you have put together, you monitor them. You make sure that they deliver. So politics is about strategy. If your strategy fails, then you deserve no sympathy.
Well, all right. Well, that's all on the news headlines. We'll take a short break now. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee meets amidst rising inflation and an electioneering season that is putting pressure on the naira. Will the MPC keep rates stable or be forced to turn hawkish? Arise business correspondent Rotus Odiri reports from Accra in Ghana, where the African Business Development Bank annual meeting is holding.
On Monday, May 23rd, Nigeria's Bureau of Statistics released the nation's latest gross domestic product figures for the first quarter of 2022. Economic growth registered at 3.11%, a slowdown from the 3.98% figure in the fourth quarter of 2021, but still a sixth straight quarter of growth since the 2020 recession caused by COVID-19. The oil sector continued to struggle with a contraction of 26.04%, with average daily oil production registering a new low of 1.49 million barrels per day, impacted by aging infrastructure and an oil theft crisis that has hampered production in Africa's largest economy. Non-oil growth registered at 6.08%. The economic figures arrived on the same day deliberations at the Monetary Policy Committee meeting began on what to do about the benchmark rate and other parameters. At the last MPC meeting in March, 4 out of 10 members voted to raise the benchmark interest rate from its current level of 11.5%, which has not changed since the rate was cut by 100 basis points from 12.5% in September of 2020. The MPC has maintained an accommodative stance, wanting to allow measures taken to support the recovering economy to sink in before taking any further action. Inflation, however, is putting pressure on the MPC to act, as it has around the world with other central banks. The central banks of Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, Egypt, and outside Africa and other climes have all cited rising inflation for the reason why they have all hiked their respective benchmark rates, sometimes more than once, like Ghana. The MPC has repeatedly pointed at Nigeria's GDP growth as a reason to stay the course. Will the latest positive figure of 3.11% in the first quarter of 2022 give the MPC reason to hold still again, or will they be forced to act by inflation that is currently at 16.82%? We asked some experts.
Interest rates should be increased because other African economies are going the route of hawkish stance. And once they are doing this, it shows that their financial markets or the economy will become more competitive because Monetary Policy Authority are responding to high commodity prices, are responding to them as expected. For instance, the Central Bank of Ghana, the Monetary Policy Authority of Ghana, have just increased policy rates by by about 200 basis points to 19%, right? And this year alone, before this recent increase of 200 basis points, this authority has increased policy rate by about 250 basis points. So this year, the Ghanaian policy rate has increased from about 14.5% to around 19%. We've also seen the same move in South Africa and Egypt. So really, we cannot stay without making any move that is, in line with what is happening globally, because the impact of the current, global economic shocks is taking a toll on prices. And it's also very important to stress that, there could be arguments around the fact that this current inflation is largely driven by exogenous factor. However, a number of countries, and Nigeria is not excluded, provided significant, fiscal and monetary policy support in 2020, and we have begun to see the impact of those huge stimulus on the economy in terms of increasing, demand, despite, sluggish level of productivity. So I think the Monetary Policy Authority, the MPC, has to increase policy rate within the range of 25 to 50 basis points today.
The national accounts that was just released brought with it a positive shock. And I understand that the Q1 2022 GDP growth figure of 3.1% year on year may cause some to assume a possible rate hike at the MPC meeting today. And of course, another core macroeconomic indicator, which is inflation, has been on a steady rise, pointing towards negative real returns. The committee has mentioned several times in the past that the high inflation figures are mainly due to structural issues. Now, at its last meeting in March, 6 out of the 10 members of the Monetary Policy Committee voted for no change in the policy rate and, of course, other parameters. This shows a shift in the collective body language of the committee. We have seen the Federal Open Market Committee in the U.S. raise the Fed funds rate target twice this year. And I understand that the ECB, which is the European Central Bank, is likely to make a similar decision at its meeting, which is scheduled to hold in July. Now, some African countries have raised their rates, not necessarily as a reactionary response to monetary policy decisions or potential monetary policy decisions in advanced economies, but to also combat rising inflation, which of course is largely due to the trickle-down effect from the Russia-Ukraine crisis. And Nigeria is not exempt from this adverse effect. I expect the committee to maintain its cautious stance at this meeting. However, if the committee does not hold, the other likely decision would be to hike perhaps between 25 to 50 basis points.
All eyes will be on Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee to see what happens next. For Arise News, Rhoda Sodiri.
Well, moving on to more business update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Looking at Chinese stocks, basically, looking at Asia Pacific, very little change, the normal kind of thing. However, there are some hopeful trade noises coming out of President Joe Biden's visit to Japan. He's been floating the idea of tariff cuts on Chinese goods. Chinese stocks, though, basically very little change. The Hang Seng, the Nikkei as well, not an enormous amount. Japan's manufacturing activity in May increased the slowest pace in 3 months. Airbnb's pulling out of China, not a massive part of its business there, but the anti-COVID restrictions which China's put on its major cities are seeing very, very few, well, no visitors, as far as I can tell, actually wanting to go there. Why would you if it's shut down? Toyota this morning is saying it's going to cut its global production plan by 100,000. That's just in June. It'll cut production because of the shortage of semiconductors and so on, but it does not affect its annual figures. It should be producing, it says, 9.7 million vehicles by March next year. US stock futures trying to continue that regaining of territory, which started yesterday. The Dow gained about 600 points yesterday, but the futures are sort of all over the place this morning, slightly lower. Zoom, their shares actually came up. This is quite important, actually, because it means that maybe people are still wanting to work from home and working quite a lot from home. Snap shares plummeted more than 28%, more than a quarter, because of looking at the way that revenue is going to be hit by so. But so, as I said, the Dow up 600 points in general trading, but futures actually not looking too good. Bank stocks doing quite well, as they normally do when interest rates rise, and maybe they'll be rising further. European stocks, well, still battling, quite honestly, to search for some kind of direction. I mentioned the United States talking about that trade organization, an economic framework with Asian partners, including Australia, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. The important thing about this is that it's not it's not a free trade agreement. It's just a trade agreement. And Biden faces political pressure from the left and the right about which particular parts of trade the US pursues around the world for all the obvious reasons. He's already said that fighting inflation is going to be a major battle for him, and this is really long-term surgery more than just a sort of bandage at the moment. Ukraine war has upended the energy situation. Of course it has. 6 months from the end of 6 months since COP26. You remember all that talk about climate change in Scotland? Well, it's actually changed. The upshot facing policymakers is that trade is the shift away from fossil fuels is happening. But how quickly is it actually going to happen? On the one side, you've got the UN General Secretary saying that there ought to be more change in the future and fairly quickly. However, Saudi Arabia's top energy official, unsurprisingly, has said, and I quote, "Look at what's happening today. Who's talking about climate change now?" The EU coming out more hawkish. Christine Lagarde boosting the euro very, very slightly, as was mentioned in Reuters' package there. It may be that the ECB starts proper tightening, i.e. interest rates in July. But at the moment, she's dropping hints that maybe their support package and buying bonds actually will be reduced aggressively next month. We'll see, but that's actually boosted things. As far as the UK is concerned, I did mention it's amazing what happens in politics, isn't it? Now Rishi Sunak is ordering plans for a windfall tax, but this is slightly tweaked. This is on electricity generation. It isn't to say that the oil and gas industry won't be paying their whack, but this is about the likes of SSE, Scottish Power, EDF and RWE, actually, because they're generators and they've actually been profiting as well. The middle section of Crossrail opens today. I know the Queen rode on it last week, but actually it's starting to carry passengers now. It's quite 73 miles long. You still have various bits of interchange and so on, but it was partly funded by London Business, which clearly saw the benefits of it, and it's easing slightly the transport and passenger pressure on Transport for London. However, and this is a big however. So what's going to happen when people start to work from home or continue to work from home, or companies adopt the hybrid image? What will happen? What will be the need for transport then? Well, we have the following from a large firm of management consultants and accountants that 1 in 5 employees in the UK is planning to change jobs this year. This is and 60%, all 60%, that's over half, said they would prefer to work from home. Thank you very much indeed. Mm-hmm. And China demand. It's the IEA is saying it's a good job that actually China is remaining weak, or we'd have big trouble in the oil markets. That's according to the IEA. At the moment, that's from Davos, an interview that was given in Davos. At the moment, oil actually trading slightly sideways. That is the global view this morning.
So let me just pick up from the IEA. So what if the demands increase out of China, and everything starts to stabilize in China, and China needs to pump in more, oil to be able to service its industry? Then what happens? The oil prices go up, and it affects us down here. Is that what happens? And I also want to talk about America and inflation. Joe Biden seems not to be able to crack inflation, but the scary part for me is the tumble the markets had recently. Is that an indication of worse things to come in the American economy?
Okay, let's do oil first of all. Yes, of course. What's going to happen is if there is an increase, that the oil price will go up, because that's what oil traders do, unfortunately, and that's the way we've seen that a lot. How much it will go up? Well, I was talking to some energy traders last week, and what they were saying was that if the price should get to $150 a barrel crude, that obviously puts refining up a great deal, then you'll have what's called demand destruction, i.e. people looking at that and thinking, actually, do we want to be using these kind of fossil fuels? I had a thought about Davos. We were saying yesterday, we were wondering actually what could actually happen. There's some great news coming out this morning, actually. I think this is quite constructive. The Royal Navy Navy and also other countries as well being affected by the world wheat shortage are thinking or exploring the possibilities of having a secure corridor through the Black Sea. My suggestion is quite simple. An aircraft carrier costs, I think, I was looking at this morning, costs about $20 billion. That doesn't include the planes on it. But that would sort of indicate a sort of a good support for a corridor of security. Why not take the begging bowl round Davos? Elon Musk is worth $290 billion.
That's tricky.
Jeff Bezos is worth 100. You see where I'm going with this?
That's tricky, Michael. That's tricky.
Imagine the PR that Amazon would get. We saved the world. We saved the world's wheat supplies. I mean, it could happen. You've got to think these things, haven't you? Sorry, I was idle for 5 minutes whilst I was waiting to come to you and just looking at those kind of figures. But you see, all these kind of things are possible. US inflation, possibly a recession. I don't see it myself. I think it's far more likely in the UK.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Michael, a number of things. First, how's it going in Tokyo, Japan, with the Quad Summit, where there's so much talk about maritime, about economic partnership, with President Biden focusing on economic partnership yesterday. But it looks like China is the main target. China is complaining about this four-nation partnership. Albanese attending it for the first time after emerging as leader of Australia over the weekend, as the Asian version of NATO. How is it the Asian version of NATO? Because at the base of it is also, this China sentiments coming from different directions, majorly led by the United States. Second, Ukraine. The Deputy Prime Minister, who also doubles as Minister of the Economy, is asking for safe passage for wheat exports. And with the IMF, the World Bank, the G7 countries.
Exactly.
Hello? Hello?
That's exactly what we've been talking about. Yes, exactly. You heard my solution.
Hello?
You heard, it's exactly what we've been talking about. We've been talking about that safe passage. My solution is very simple. Go around Davos, get in touch with all these rich people and say, hey, how about buying some warships and getting that corridor going? Great PR. We've saved the world.
Well, but the Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister is asking for international support to make this happen. Will that happen? The Ukrainians are asking for safe passage, a safe corridor through the Black Sea, because what they've been doing on the Danube River has not been able to make any impact. Now, is the IMF, the World Bank, the UN, are these multilateral organizations, really in a position to provide a kind of guarantee or support that Ukraine is looking for? And talking about Davos, well, Davos, we were told that, ahead of the conference, a group called the Patriotic Millionaires, made up of about 150 millionaires and billionaires. They are saying tax the wealthy ones in the world. Okay, would the policymakers go in that direction and impose more tax on the wealthy? And what difference would that make?
Millionaires wouldn't make any difference at all. Billionaires might make a difference. What actually happens at Davos, I don't know. You've heard what my suggestion is. I mean, that's what I'd be doing. I'd be saying, listen, if you want to save the world, how about diverting some of your billions, and you can afford it, to making sure that developing countries actually, particularly those in North Africa and below, and also in Africa as well, and other places in the world as well, benefit from your riches by opening this wheat corridor. It seems like a great idea. It seems like a complete no-brainer. Who doesn't benefit? And it also gives a powerful message to Putin, whatever he thinks at the moment, that the world actually can move on. As far as the talks in Japan with Biden, the rest of it's concerned, I don't see it as a NATO. What I see it is it's quite an important diplomatic lever. If you're saying to the likes of China, and don't get carried away by, yeah, of course, China is going to be populously the biggest power in the world fairly soon, but it does face all the problems that we know, all the problems of an aging population, all the problems of a lockdown. It's got to come out of this. There are all sorts of things going on. And if you're looking at nations saying, actually, do you know what we're going to do? And we're not talking about free trade. We're talking about trade cooperation. That's really important. So in other words, this is not hitting any of the domestic markets or the domestic producers. What it's doing is it's opening up export markets for them. I think it's actually quite constructive. I would much rather there were trade wars than massacres, wouldn't you?
Right.
Oh, certainly.
Well, Michael, I wanted to touch on Airbnb shutting down its domestic rental in China. How does that affect the company, and why are they moving out?
Well, they're moving out because a lot of corporates are actually moving out. What they're seeing is they're just simply not getting the business. It won't affect Airbnb much. It's about 1%. And what they will do is they will target, what they've said is they're going to target, for example, Chinese tourists coming out of China into other parts of the world, and making sure that they know that if they want to stay in the capital city, wherever it may be, then they can use Airbnb in those countries. As far as the withdrawal's concerned, it's just another indication of the soft power of capitalism being withdrawn, in the same way that in the same way that McDonald's getting out of Russia. I mean, of course, somebody will take over the brand there. We were talking about that last week, and we were wondering about some appropriate names for it, which we didn't come up with. We understand that Uncle Vanya may be one of them. But anyway, that's a separate thing. But I think if you're seeing the shift away from where companies either make money or don't feel comfortable politically, that's what we're seeing right now. It won't affect Airbnb very much at all, but it's an indication of the way that an international company feels as though this lockdown is actually crimping business in a place like China.
Oh, thank you very much, Michael. We'll see you tomorrow.